So I was talking about that the millennials who is knowledgeable about softwares and they are very much familiar with using these new technologies and all that. Their things are different for than the way that they work are different than the company veteran who knows every in and out about the company, but they are not a tech savvy people most of the time. So then understanding and acknowledging the different among your company and the culture, it can be, it can help you to become successful in the change management approach that you are taking. If the most employees are going to end up in the using a particular system or the software, then there is absolutely no reason to implement it. In fact, the most important aspect of the change management is having buying from all employees. The moment you bring that in, it is going to be very easy for you to implement those changes. Then what simulates the organizational change? Let me adjust my camera a little bit. Yeah. Let me move my camera to the camera. Okay. Now, what is going on with the people that we are facing it today? Or they realize the actual the consequences or the importance of the choice why they are here, and this is because they've just changed changes happening in the environment, and there are driving forces which pull them or push them to get into certain position, or maybe they are unable to do it or unwilling to change, and there are need for guidance for them. So the management, they adopt the strategy to accomplish some of the overall goal. It may be provoked by some major outside driving forces. Example, substantial cut in funding. So then you can't do much. You have to make that change. You have to cut costs, for example. Some organization might take a decision. Now we had office 5-story building here. Now with the work from home concept is being introduced where the majority of the employees cannot come to work all 5 days. So we are bringing in the policy that it's only 25% of the employees. Depends on the organization, the business types and all that. Then no point you maintain that 4-story building. We decided to move to a place where you can accommodate 1/5 of that place where only 1/5 of the employees are going to be in the office on a particular given time. So then you don't bring in that concept of fixed table, fixed number. Nothing is fixed. You have to, and so you have the infrastructure to support that. So then you cut down the cost heavily, and for you to achieve that, end of the day, what management wanted is to cut down the cost. But to do that, you have to make so many changes in the organization. So that is what we are talking about here, how we can accommodate. And the organization may wish to evolve to a different level in the lifestyle. And for example, the traditional government to an e-government, right? Which is currently we are experiencing it. A lot of changes are happening. And that also a big change management process. And transition to a new chief executive revoke organization-wide change when his or her new and unique personality forward in the entire organization. So when the new executive is onboarded, and they also come up with the new ideas, and then we have to we ended up making a lot of changes around that as well. So what stimulate the organizational change? Here it talks about two alternatives to cope up the culture of this change: adopt or go. Right? The basic idea of providing guidance is about overcoming resistance to cope up with unable or unwilling people. If they are not providing support or they are not willing to cope up, then you have two choices. Either you have to adopt it or you can leave. It's about hearts and minds and the beliefs of the people. And it's really leading institutions in the are the real winners, and they tap into their staff emotion and not just the rational thinking. So that's how they usually get into. Usually, if you look at the change adoption curve, initially the resistance will be more. That time, a lot of people, they tend to ignore. Then they start complaining about the issues and challenges. Then somebody start, and then slunk, and then acceptance. So after that, it takes slowly. So the noise levels are generally high during this period. After that, it reduces. When you start it also, a lot of people won't talk much. But when you really get into the peak, then you get a lot of noises coming up and all that. And then after that, they slowly adapt to it. So that's how it is. So the change management plan that should support a smooth transition, and that should ensure your employees are guided through that particular change journey. There can be harsh facts in this. Approximately, there are 70% of change initiatives fail due to negative employee attitudes and unproductive management behavior. So therefore, both the management behavior as well as employees also responsible. So you got to understand that when you come up with the change management plan. Now, let's look at this, what the effective managers are taking part of most organizations today. They are responding to a fast-moving external businesses environment. It's especially local and the global economic and the technological environment and the advancement. They clearly define the change and align to the business goal, and they determine the impact and those affected. And also they develop a communication strategy, and it provides effective training and implement a support structure and measure the change management process. This is where we said that most of the time we see the negative attitude of the employee can make an impact, as well as the management behavior. So if the management behavior and the employee attitudes are supporting, then there is nothing can stop you from this making those transformation in your organization. Now, first thing that you have to clearly define the change and align it to the business goal. It is one thing that articulate the change, and the entirely another to the change is required, and it is entirely to another to conduct a critical review against the organizational objectives and performance goal. This is to ensure the change will carry your business in the right direction, strategically, financially, and ethically. Here, the two questions that you should be asking: what do we need to change, and what is the change which is required for your organization? Because you are defining the change which aligning into your business goal. If it is not aligning into your business goal, then you should not be initiating that. Then you should clearly specify what do we need to change and what is the change which is required. The next is the determine the impacts and those who are affected. Once you know exactly what you wish to achieve and why you wanted to achieve this, and you should then determine the impact of the change at various organizational levels. Because what I'm talking about is it's a vast area, especially when it comes to the organization change management, where it is applied when you go for a large software implementation projects like ERP. When you're completely moving into the new ERP system, then this sort of change management practice has to happen. You are implementing a large accounting and finance system. Then the accounting and finance related change management has to happen. You are moving into the customer relationship management, new platform. Then the change management should happen, because the culture they were dealing with, the interacting with the customers are entirely changing. It can be the internal employees, or it can be your customers who is interacting with you. Everything has to change. This is where this will inform where will you start from the blueprint, where you are, whatever the training which is required to support, and what is needed the most to mitigate the impact, and so on. So that way, you will see what are the impacts of the changes and who will change the effect the most, and how will the change be received. And those are the areas that will be discussed out here. And then develop the communication strategy. It's absolutely must to communicate the change to determine the most effective means of the communication for the group or the individual. That will bring them on board. Whoever the stakeholders who is going to be part of this change management process. That means the party who is implementing it, the stakeholders mean the person who is part of that change management process. Everyone need to be communicated well. And here you are going to look at how will the change be communicated? What is the interval? There can be a broadcast, there can be a awareness session, there can be a managerial level discussion, and you can have some sort of a quiz program going on, you can have some sort of a giveaways and all that given, and you can have a feedback that can be managed well, because whenever change is happening, you should pay attention and you should be able to track it and how the employees are sensing out of it and how they are responding to it, whether is it relevant to them, right? If it is not going to be accepted by the majority of the people, then there is a problem. You got to adjust to it accordingly. Then to provide the effective training. It's most important that people receive the training in structured way and also the informal way as well. And to teach the skills and knowledge required to operate efficiently as change is rolling out. Here, the key area to be addressed was what behavior and the skills that are required to achieve that business result. Everything has to be aligned to the business result, what you wanted to achieve. What training and delivery method will be most effective for them? Whether is it online, whether is it face-to-face, whether is it a classroom thing, whether is it like a group, you divide into group and do that part, whether you send them into the field and do the field study along with this, whether you bring everyone to the hotel and do awareness session, let them do a workshop, and then you or put them into the group and make them feel happy, comfortable, and all that. Everything matters, right? So those are the areas that you should be focusing on when you are doing this change management. And then they implement the support structure to help the employee to adjust to the change, how a role is performed, a mentorship or the open door policy with the management to ask a question as they arise could be set up and so on. So here we are going to see where is the support most required. Because not everybody, I mean, there are organizations that different level of people will be there. When you deploy it to, for example, if it is an organization which has one single location and everybody is in the same venue and all that, that's not going to be a big challenge for you. But when it comes to the situation where you have many branches, maybe island-wide, you will be hiring the resources also in that particular area itself. A person who is in Colombo or Western Province, and maybe from Mana and Hambantota or maybe Polonnaruwa or Jaffna, the level of knowledge, expertise, and the fluency with the system and the environment, the culture they came through, it's definitely different. So you got to pay attention where the most support is required. Sometimes the Western Province people, they should be able to quickly adopt. But they may not be able to sit and learn and do these things and other things. And so you have to spend time to get things in, but they will pick it up. But the people from rural area, they have attitude of learning thing, reading it and understand and all that, but they don't know how to do it. Right? So those people, the different set of skill sets are required. So what type of support will make them most effective? This is what you got to understand. Now, let's see measure the change process. You should evaluate your change management plan to determine whether its effectiveness, and also you should document any lesson learned that could give you, did the change assist in achieving the business goal? Where there was a change management process is successful, what could have been done differently? So those are the areas that you are going to look at from the measure the change process. I'll repeat again here from effective organizational change management. There are 6 policies, and it's clearly define the change and align to the business goal, and determine impact and those affected, and develop a communication strategy, and then provide the effective training, implement the support structure, measure the change process. So those are the 6 parameters. Let's look at the change curve. To minimize the size or the duration of productivity dip. Now here what we see, the productivity dip. Because when the change started, it is high, and then denial came. Then once the moment people start denying it, then the productivity goes down, right? It because of the blame, or blame on the stuff and blame on themselves, and uncertainty and confusion. So with that, it goes to the dip. And so in order for us to minimize the productivity dip, it depends upon how quickly you're creating the acceptance to the strategy and plan that that can bring it up. And gain that acceptance is often difficult process for many organizations, as some employees will have various reasons and they seek block to the change. They never wanted that change to happen. So we'll have to identify how we can bring in that acceptance and then fix the problem. So we got to have the problem solving skills as well, and then find a way to move on with that. So unless we identify those, it's going to be difficult. But this is the typical cycle in most of the change scenario. We got to understand that as well. Now, the forces for the change, mainly the external forces for change, which refers to the outside influence. The outside influence can be the economy. Now, today, the economic situation, what we see is terrible economic situation. It cannot do much. And then the consumer demand. Then again, we can look at how people wanted to have the experience. They wanted to do the shopping and all that while they're being at home. And then whether that experience is, whether they are receiving that experience or not, that's a different story. But for us to make it success, the organization, they have to provide that experience. That is what the consumer demand. And then the competition. Take an example when Kiehl's was able to deliver the online delivery. The Food City started, Hopico also started, and then the Glomart also started. Likewise, now everybody starting it. So the competition also will help that change to happen. Or it can prevent the company from achieving short-term or long-term goals as well. To take a SWOT analysis, for example, it can identify, it can help you identify the internal and external strengths and weaknesses and opportunities and so on. So generally in a business, the internal factors for a change are refers to as the people systems within the company to help to prevent achieving the short-term and long-term goals. So strategies, structures, staff, goals, and technical equipment. So those are the strategies. Now, resistance to the change. Generally, the efforts by employees to block the intended change, that's what we call the resistance to change. Where resistance, you have, you can define it as behavior in which the employee or a person who intend to protect the individual from effect of real or imagined change. So it can be really, they can be affected, or they can assume that they can be affected due to this change. He might lose his job, or he might lose the control. He might, he must be, that comfortable the way it's currently being done. When you bring in this change, he might feel, he or she might feel, this is this way that I'm going to lose the control. Then this guy, everybody can have access to, and everybody can deal with anyone. Where last 10 years I was managing like this without an issue. Why do you want to change it? You will find all sort of stories coming up when the people started resistance to the change. Sometimes these resistance are hidden also. Sometimes, that you won't see that things are not moving, but you can't see the real reason why it is happening. So you have to take active steps to find out where the problem is coming from. Right? So you should understand why it is important and why this is happening. We manage the resistance by working with the people and by helping with them to deal with their concerns and issues that they think it can be real, or it can be imagination also. there are many ways to build acceptance. It is important to be flexible, but you've got to be persistent. Okay. Now let's look at this resistance to change. The company, why people are resistant to the change. Mainly the organizations may be operating in an environment that is changing so fast. Then the company is not be able to develop an implementation or any change management plan which is suitable with the suitable change management strategies. Generally, the resistance coming in when they are in a different areas. When you look at the two people or the team of the people in a different way, right? You can the resistance can be a defense mechanism caused by the frustration or the you can call it as frustration, yeah. And then the individual may not be resisting the change, but as they are resisting a potential loss, right? Because sometimes they may not see by resisting that change what sort of loss that can cause to them, cause to the organization, or what sort of power that they are going to get it through this change. So they might even realize that they would have, if they are supported, they work together, they would have got more power and more energy to work. And this may also a case there is not a disagreement with the benefit of the new processes, but rather fear of unknown future. So that is the most critical part, because it's not something that they are not in disagreement, but they feel that I don't know what will happen. You don't have any visibility. This is why the communication is important. And it's about the ability to adopt. And for example, the fear that will not be able to develop a new skills. They might think, oh, I won't be able to do that on my own. So then how are you going to help them? This sort of behavior that are required when you are you have to address these sort of behaviors when you are setting up these change boards and all that. There may be a determine the field best in system. Yeah. So there can be a disagreement or some negativity which is coming up due to the unfairness of the change as well. This can be this sort of attitude. This can be enough to lead to sabotage the whole project itself sometimes. Let's look at that. How prevalent is resistance to change? Now, the change in the workplace is generally occurring at a fast pace than ever before. And this will continue to do as well, because none of the organization, they wanted to just set it up their procedures, applications, and all that, and then say that, okay, now we are settled, no more changes required hereafter, just focus on the business. Then what will happen? Competition, they will come up with new strategies, new systems, and all that, and they will take over the business. Maybe 2 months, 3 months, 6 months, 1 year down the line, you will end up with maybe 20% of your customers, but 80% of your customers itself would have been moved to your competitors. So therefore, it is common that change process is always there. And you will always face that resistance and pushback from staff to stakeholders and so on. So one of the key effective change management and effective implementation of change is the way that you communicate, the way you deal with the resistance which is coming from the staff. Excuse me for a minute, I'm just quickly. Sorry about it. All right. So how we handle this prevalent situation? Here it is generally acknowledged that in an average organization, when the intention for change is around 15% of the workforce is eager to accept it. Okay, so that we see everywhere. There is a set of people, they are the first to accept it. You will always find those people. You have to recognize the people early stage for you to make it a success. Then another 15% of the people will is dead set against it. That also always there. 70% is sitting on the fence, waiting to see what happens. That's the most common scenario. Whether which side that you are going to be, it is up to you. Right? If it is success, they will fall into the success part. If it is fail, they will say, they're going to hit your okay. This is how the attitude is going to be. That's a 70%. So you got to identify that 15%. And then get their support to make that change and show some results. Then get the 70% to support you. Then you will have 85%. So automatically that 15% join with you. You can make it as 100%, but it's very difficult to get 100%. But still you can, if you put your right effort, you should be able to get it done. Okay. So this is one of the key in the effective change management, where the implementation of the change is the way you communicate, like I mentioned. Then see how you can minimize the resistance to change. Now, minimizing the resistance to change in the organization is first the communication. How you improve the urgency and the reduce uncertainty. The highest priority and the first strategy to change is improve the urgency. Because you have to prioritize it and then bring in that important part first. And then you got to reduce the uncertainties. Because the moment you show them the uncertainty, they tend to, these 70% tend to take the backseat. Your target is how are you going to get 70% closer to you? Your end objective is to make this change process successful. So the reducing the uncertainty is the fear of unknown. So that is one of the major road blocker for a change. So you have to reduce that. Then as you move on, with the time that you can, by taking little extra time, or with the time that you are moving on, and you can simply minimize the resistance to the change. You won't be able to act on it immediately. So you can let it go without taking too much of action or without taking that into priority. You can just let it go. And slowly and gradually they get adapted to that change. Then the training. The training provides the new knowledge and the skills. This includes the coaching and action learning programs and so on. It can help break all routine to adapt to the new roles. The problem here is potentially the time consuming, and it is a costly exercise as well. So always to minimizing the resistance to change, and the training is costly because you have to bring in the right people and all that to do the training. And resistance to change, which can cause a lot of damage in terms of time and reputation. Sometimes you may not be able to go on time, go live on time, and then you will end up paying penalties. Next part is the employee involvement. Because what I'm saying is this is very important. How do you minimize the resistance to change? Number one, the communication. Number two, training. Then the employee involvement. This employee involvement increase ownership of the change. Make them involved, make them responsible, make them part of it. Make them take the ownership to drive this. Then you help serving the face and also the reducing the fear of unknowns, because they are the people who is doing it. The people who is talking about, no, I don't know and all that, they are the people who is doing it. So you are training them, you are communicating the plan, and then you are giving them the ownership, and then you are letting them drive it. And you can include like team or the task forces to drive this, and look at certain conferences and take part and understand how things are happening and all that. The problem out here is this is also time consuming. This is also can create potential conflict. And it can also bring in some resistance to the change in terms of training the employees and all that, which is required a lot of time and a lot of money as well. Then the stress management, where when communicating the training and involvement to do, not to resolve the stress, but the potential benefit. Benefit is it's about more about the motivation to the change, and and it will create less fear about of these unknowns. And also this sort of activities will not have much cost incurred as well. But the problem we could face out here when it comes to stress management, this is again the time consuming activity, and this is also a bit expensive. Does not help everyone to minimize resistance to change. And you got to involve with the employees with the stress management trainings and so on. Then the negotiation. When the people are clearly lose something, then they won't support, right? If they feel that they were handling that particular role, they had 5 responsibilities before. Now, after this change, they are going to have only 2 responsibilities. Rest of the item, nobody is required. That manager can just put a checkbox and he can just approve it because everything is available in the system. So therefore, you don't need to depend on the people. Then this guy got paid. Oh, all these days I used to approve it. Now these people are taken out, reduce my responsibility. It's making his life easier. But he's not, he's taking other way around, right? Then the corrections, question where when all everything is happening, or otherwise everything can be failed. It can be a certain different way of influencing the people, or some radical way of handling these things matters, like resistance to minimize the changes and all that, because this is about threatening and try to do it in a different way. That's also one of the strategy that you can take it as the last part of it. Let's look at the key for successful change, which is relevance when it comes to the interaction between the managers and employees, for especially the value creation processes and so on. Mainly the interaction that can generate either win-win or win-loss or loss-loss. Win-win, win-loss, loss-loss, or it can be loss-win. There are various ways, but generally here we are talking about 2 things: win-win, loss-loss. By this is by altering the restriction to managers and the employees' behaviors and so on. So here the key successful management of organization change lies in the people. Then they are the agent for successful transformation of the organization. Now, for a successful change, there has to be an active, committed leader and clear case and specific goals for change. It's embedded changes, and employee participation is important, and use of hidden networks and all that. So let's this is also important for a successful change, from and how we are going to manage those changes and so on. Now, when we do the change, especially if you want your staff to embrace the change projects, you've got to be honest about all their objectives. It can be the good, it can be the bad, but if you are not, your staff will have their own ideas, their own versions, right? So everyone knows it's really about cost cutting or doing more with less. There is no doubt on that. They know, finally, what the organization wanted to achieve. Then, like most things in our life, its truth is about how mostly the leadership, they pitch their initiative in their team is usually somewhere in between that active deception and the radical transparency. Either they put it completely out or they put it in a very systematic way. There is nothing wrong in highlighting the good that is expected to come out from major change efforts. But your staffs, they are smart enough to assume that any transformational effort are going to require some degree of pain. There is no change happen without having a pain. So no matter how legitimately or rosy the end state may be, not acknowledging this fact allow your staff to create their own story about the darker side of your initiatives. And most cases, it will be far dramatic than the reality. You would have never thought about it, that how this is going to interpret that by them. They would have come up with some story, some dramatic story to completely keep them away. So therefore, don't sugarcoat. That's what this statement, don't sugarcoat your challenges initiative. Everyone knows it's really about cost cutting and doing more with the less. So how best that we can accomplish this change? It's a conflicting goal that can kill the project itself. So as I said, that always your goal should be aligned with your business goal. Since our interest here is to manage the organizational-wide change, it can be helpful to redefine resistance to change as whatever the employees are not wholeheartedly embracing the change or the management want to implement it. That's fine. But this allows for us to gain acceptance. That is a positive results, rather than on breaking down the resistance, which is the negative factor. So what we wanted to achieve is the positive or the gaining acceptance by the employees. For that, you need to get the senior management agreement. And you got to identify the champion who can articulate the reason for an advantage of the change, and that can translate the vision for change into a realistic plan and then carry out the plan. This involves the people from every areas of the organizations. You can communicate, educate, and educate. That's the only way. And get organizational buy-in to the change. And then modify the organizational structure so that they will sustain the change. So these are important points for you to remember. When you're answering the question, it's not something you copy as it is, but you try to interpret, you try to come up with your own explanation so that you can give a complete answer. So how best that we can accomplish a change? You can widely communicate the potential need for a change. Communicating what you are going to do it, and communicate what was done and how it worked out. You communicate that senior management back this strategy anonymously. So that's how you make the communication, because communication is the most important part. And then you get as much feedback as practical from an employee, including what they are thinking of the problems and what should be done to resolve them. And if possible, work with the team of employees to manage those changes. Those are the important aspects that you should be considering. And then don't get wrapped up in doing changes for the sake of change. Know why you are making this change. What are the goals? Do you hope to accomplish this, communicate their goal? So the communication is important part. Sometimes you should not communicate that part also to them directly, because initially there might be restrictions, challenges coming in. Then you plan the change. How you plan to reach the goal? What will you need to reach the goal? How long it might take And how will you know when you have reached the goal or not? Focus on the coordination of those departmental program in your organization, not on each part by itself. So then have someone in charge of those plans. So those are the characteristics that you could look at in terms of when you're planning for the change. Then the delegated decision to employee as much as possible. This including getting them to the authority as well as responsibility to get the job done and so on. As much as possible, let them decide how to do the project. Then the process won't be definitely aha. It will take longer time than you think. And they keep perspectives. You keep focus on meeting the needs of your customers or the client. Most importantly, take care of yourself. The organization-wide change can highly successful, but you might face a lot of challenges when you put too much of effort. Don't seek to control the change, but rather you expect it and you understand it and manage it. So far, any questions on this? You can also have a closure in the plans and acknowledge the celebrate on your accomplishment and so on. And you may read some resources about organizational change, how new forms of changes and structures should be done. And you can possibly consider using a consultant to ensure that consultant is highly experienced and especially in the organization-wide change, whatever subject that you are taking. Now, how to motivate the people? The motivation of the affected staff increase in a positive sense when they change the manager's skills and also carrying out a complex shifts. And some studies says that the training and empowering brave leaders are necessary. Otherwise, they might face challenges when they are implementing. And change managers that they can overcome this problem by appropriately compensating the affected managers and employees. There's several practical strategies for reducing resistance. And you can also increase the motivation that include the support for innovation and some departments may be highly innovative. So you have to come up with a plan how you can incentive them, support them, and how you can prepare a better career opportunities for certain managers and who is implementing this change management successfully and so on. Because when they see there is a career advancement, so they also will get more involved. Okay. Lastly, the participation in communication. The communication and the participation, which is a circumstance where the resistance to organization change development because of the lack of motivation during the strategy implementation. So as long as you participation will never work as long as it is treated as a you own it or this is how you wanted to do it. So you have to give them that comfort. So the employees and managers, they become motivated if they are given the sufficient information and allowed to participate in the change process. So then only they they become involved and they take that ownership. Any questions so far? Shall I continue? So, you all with me? Yeah. Any question? Let's look at this modern government and how the change management in the e-government. So this e-government is mainly, it is a hot topic in most of the government places, most of the government, not only Sri Lanka, everywhere. So large number of services that are partly or fully online now. Now that with this COVID, there's no choice. They have to make sure entire services, entire government services, they should be able to access it online. It can be a passport renewal, vehicle registration, tax filing, health record retrieval. But the government is nowadays, it is being managed like a legacy companies. Systems are built with a heavy, massive cost, and those systems are managed within the department. And we are unable to connect effectively to get this. Like, you look at the companies like Amazon, they use the platform approach to scale up the services using central tool to manage to meet the complexity of their users. And there can be a similar approach taken by the government, the public sector, to meet the goals of connecting all the services, the government services into a single platform. So building on government shared infrastructure, that means now we are providing, submitting our information. It can be vehicle, it can be our starting from birth registration to every single operation, electricity, telephone, bank accounts, and then how many places that we are visiting, the passport, identity card, and so many activities that we involve. Every time we participate, we have to produce our birth certificate, billing proof, what else? Anything and everything that you have to carry every time. But there is no single source of truth. Once you validate it, you are a person X. You have this identity. Why can't we use the same identity, at least within the government departments? So there has to be there's a core requirement for a platform government model, that government provides access to set of database and the shared application that the other parts of the government or civil society and even the private sector can leverage to solve the public problems. The clearest current example of such system is the Estonia government, where a national individual identification layer that they have set it up along with the communication infrastructure called X-Road, that move information between agents in the data registries and so on. If an agency or the private company want to create a new service, it must comply with some basic data standards to build on top of that X-Road stack. So there has to be one common approach to bring in that data standard. Then only you can have that synchronization. Otherwise, the way it's currently being handled, the data are being stored, the developments are happening in siloed, then you may not be able to bring that data into one. Typically, the government, they should move to the platform approach that I mentioned, where the public sectors are, even the public sectors also having almost like I'm talking about large enterprises, they also running most of the time in siloed, but I can see some efforts are being made to bring those infrastructure, bring those services, connectivity together. into the shared interoperable infrastructure and bring in that official data sets. In that way, they can organize a technology foundation that can allow the citizen to have a single view and deliver the better service to the citizen. And also that will bring in more safety mechanism, because when we provide the information in many places, we don't know where the data is end up in. When one party is compromised, then the entire data which belongs to that particular section will be compromised. And this way we can bring in more, deliver some efficient service, as well as we can have the accountability. And in long term, it could transform the way that the government works with the technology and how it relates to the citizens as well. So the use of ICT combined with the organizational change and new skills in order to improve public service and democratic processes and public policies, right? So I think this is a typical scenario of government change management in the government, which is expected, where voting, text board, cabinet, geoportal, e-school, e-ticket, e-residence, e-prescription, e-business, e-notary. So I think now we are almost reaching to this level. Thanks to COVID, now we are also reaching to this level. And I don't know how, when we will end up it, but somehow we will reach some level by next year, mid or by towards the end of next year. Hopefully we should be able to have this blueprint up and running. Right. So before we move on to that, there is a quiz. Let me enable that. This is actually a pretty long quiz, right? I'm going to put the question here, and also I'm going to share the link on chat, right? Can you confirm whether you can access it? Because this will require some time for you to work on it. Can you confirm whether you can access the chat? Access the questions? There are 7 questions. I'm going to give you 15 minutes. That means now 1:40. Are you okay? All of you, can you access?
Yes, sir.
Shall we do the quiz? You don't need, I know you don't need 15 minutes, but I'm just thinking of giving you 15 minutes. If you are listening to me, following me, it's very easy for you to answer this.
Excuse me, sir. Hello. Excuse me, sir.
What is the status? Have you done it? So far, 7 responses. Pretty long answers. So I'll give you some extra time after this class. You can possibly manage those, attend to those questions. So let's move on with the rest of the things. Right? Shall we? Can I continue?
Okay, sir.
Okay. All right. So forces for change. That's where we have to continue. I need to move a little bit faster because I have to cover a lot. I mean, almost half of the session to be covered. It's actually you have to cover. I have to put more effort. Just got 1 hour, 1.5 hours. So let's finish it off quickly. So we have defined this organizational change and understand why this managing is changing is important. Now we're going to understand the individual or group or structural levels that the change which happen across the globe, and you should know what internal and external factors that organizational change which is affecting, and we should be able to explain the role of the change. The role of the change, role of the national and the organizational culture in the organizational stability. And then you should be able to understand the process that involved in planning the changes, and especially in terms of understand how the micro level of theories are being used, so on and so forth. So when you discuss about the technology adoption, that's something that I want to address it here, because my intention was to look at from how technology changes can be effective, and how can we make those things. Still, what we see is the adoption of technology is mostly in line with the development of the technology in other part of the world. So we try to import the technology and adapt to it. Here, as of today, what we see is there are more than 25 mobile payment application available, and there are 55 taxi hailing application. The country is size like Sri Lanka, just imagine. In the financial system, which is Sri Lanka, we have 32 banks, and in the service sector, which is nearly 57% of the services economy belongs to this, the financial assets belongs to this service economy. The banking is the biggest contributor, banking, finance, and telecom. This asset, financial asset that we are talking about, closer to $90 billion. But if you look at the economy size of the Facebook, it's $98 billion. They have 58,000, somewhere 50,000 plus employees. That can tell you that this size and the money, the amount of people who work for the money doesn't matter. When we end of the day, we all human beings out here in Sri Lanka or anyone in any part of the world, we earn our salary, we earn our expenses to spend, right? So that means by earning we are contributing to the economy. So what is the contribution? Now, if you look at the current situation, GDP is less than 5, and then the amount that we should pay to the as a foreign debt, the loan, which is over 500,000. Still increasing, because to cover up the current situation, look at the dollar rate and the rupee depreciation. The more the rupee is depreciated now, because we have to pay in dollars. If it is, the depreciation is 20%, our debt to the foreign countries become, it will increase by 20%. If it is 100,000, it will become 120,000. 500,000, it will become 600,000. Every individual. So this is what we are facing it right now. We have to understand the bigger picture of it. It's not about our our family, our organization, our community, our culture, our country. And we have to look at beyond that level, how we can go beyond that much. If you look at the adoption of technology, or even the today, we as Sri Lanka, we have 23 million debit cards, which is 149% of the total population. I'm sure this account, so maybe I have three debit cards with me. So similarly, every one of you may be having at least more than one card that account for this 23 million or the 149%. But overall, right, not everybody carry two cards as well. So in an average, more or less every citizen have access to bank. In Sri Lanka, the latest statistics is more than 89%. Far better than US. US, I think somewhere around 63%. Just imagine, we have positioned ourselves. This is why our literacy rate is high, right? But that doesn't mean that our literacy rate is represented correctly in everywhere. I was reading to one of these, I'm sorry, I'm going a little bit out of subject also, but to set you the context that why it is important. I was reading to one of these statistics today morning. It says we have 225 parliamentarians, where 95 of them have failed all level. Then just let me see whether I can see that in review. Anyway, I really missed that. So if you look at that, that doesn't represent, but in Sri Lanka, we have that correct figure, which is, which is supporting for us to move towards that. Whatever the transformation changes which is required. So today, as of before COVID, I must give credit to COVID also. Before COVID, there were only 5% of the total transaction go through the digital channel, while we have 120%, 149% adoption of, 149% people who is using debit card. So that means the people who is holding the account and who can do the transaction online are 149%. But only 5% of the total transaction goes through the digital channel. Whereas in developed countries, that ratio is more than 70%. So this situation created by COVID is official, it is a real opportunity for us. Where if you look at the rest of the world, there are, one of the examples is Congo Money from Thailand, I believe. It's a social media platform, like a local Facebook there. They do the transaction much bigger than any bank, public bank. The per day transaction is much bigger than the bank. Today, you can't compare the Sri Lanka, today you can't compare with Bank of Ceylon and People's Bank transaction with any other banks, any other institution. They do the highest transaction. But this social media platform, likewise, Singapore, one of the Singapore bank have opened their branch in India. No physical office. It's virtual branch. There is no physical office at all. But they accept money, they do the transaction, they do everything. This is where the world is moving towards. This is the level that we should look at, that how the organizations has to be changed. So where we are looking at knowledge-based economy, Sri Lanka is traditionally into a commodity-based economy, where the agriculture is our main income source, or we are producing more agriculture. This thing we are self-sufficient, but now we are moving into service. That doesn't mean we drop the agriculture. That's what happens. We, as a country, we can do the export, but still export of rice, paddy, and several things. But we still import it. So we wanted to move to a knowledge-based economy, then we dropped to on the other hand. The virtual organization, the example that I brought up, and then the mergers and acquisition, where we should be able to get connected, collaborate with global partners. And electronic commerce, again, I explained you about how the adoption of e-commerce adoption. E-commerce adoption is even during COVID, the beginning around 7%. Even though digital channels interaction was 5%, the e-commerce adoption was around 7% only. Still, rest of the people, they order online, but they cash. They don't make the transaction online. But the trust need to be built. Likewise, various stuff that we can talk about it, but those are the forces which is muting the change. The change the types of changes where all organizations need the change and develop if they remain competitive, and they have to satisfy their investors, their client, their management of expectations. These expectations are increasing on a daily basis, day by day. There is a need to change. It is usually driven by the external forces, such as legislations and the competition, or some of the internal forces as well, like we wanted to implement new technologies and so on. If change managers are developed, if they have to develop an effective implementation plan, they need to understand the different type of changes. So one is that there are two types of changes. It's a crisis change or reactive change. The reactive change or the crisis change is an approach which is driven by external factor or fear of a failure. If you think that we are going to fail, then you bring in a change or some disaster. Now this COVID, where we cannot go to office, we have to enable the employees to work from home. Then we have to make all sort of changes, bring in new infrastructure, VPN, and make every service available through the VPN or the internet, because you have to let the previously customers used to visit your branch and purchase the item. Now you have to make it available online, where users should be able to log in and order whatever items they wanted. If not, they are going to go with the party who has committed to do that service. So the many organizations have undergone substantial changes within the recent year, and the pace of change is increasing dramatically. The organizational change at an operational or the process level, which required changes to happen day by day, or their routine tasks, and in order to deliver what is the obligation to the customers or to improve the performance of the organization. The strategy, the clear strategy is required when planning a change, whether it is a crisis or it is a choice taken by the organization to drive that. Second part is the chosen change or the adoption change. This can be accommodated with the current paradigm, especially we call it the assumption or belief, saying that yes, we must go with these changes because this is how other organizations have progressed. Now that we have completed our 10 years of operation, and we were doing this all sort of manual works and all that, it is good to move to the fully automated because we got all the infrastructure, all the processes in place. Now we are good to move to the fully automated process. So we are coming to the agreement, understanding, and then we are adopting to the change. This occurs incrementally and also through the stages. So you decide, okay, now we wanted to go for it, but we cannot just go and replace the whole thing together. We go with step by step, stage 1, 2, 3, 4. We only accept the order, let the customer to order online, or we accept the order through the traditional channels, but our staff, we appoint a call center or we appoint a help desk. They will receive the call, they will enter that information into the system where that gets processed internally and that delivery, everything can be make it easy. Then you make, okay, customer, you give them the portal access and all, saying that, look, rather you call us, why don't you just directly log in and put the details online? So that way they also feel, okay, that's good idea. Why should we call? And if they don't get the message right, if they put the wrong item, and then again it's a problem for us to correct it and all that. Straight away we will put that. That's good. Then you move to the area where you can track it and all that. Then you can see there. You tell them, look, rather you place the order and all that. We will also maintain your whatever stocks that which is there. So then we know that you don't need to order. When your stock is reducing less than, let's say 30%, we will get the confirmation from you and we will place the order and we will deliver to you. Customer also feel, yeah, why not? Rather than I look at my stock and then somebody go and order, why not? If you can see the account status and the stock inventory and deliver it on time, which is good. So those are the adaptation, that the stages that you are talking about. This is how we are going to move through the change management process. Then we are talking about various other steps and where you can realign. So especially in the organization, change can be at a strategic level, impacting on the direction of the company and the people it employs and requires step changes and so on. Now then let's look at the yeah.
Excuse me, can you explain the difference between the chosen and the crisis changes?
No, the crisis changes, as I mentioned, that it is a designed and implemented in a orderly and timely. So when you look at the crisis, it is usually your design and implemented. Okay, there is a small mistake out here. I actually, when I type it, there was a small typo error. So you have to, this is for the design and implemented orderly and timely fashion. This has to come to the chosen change, but the crisis change is where you where it is a reactive change, where it is a reactive approach where when it is affected by the external factors, or when it is when the organization have a fear of a failure. The crisis changes, we call it as the chosen changes, we call it as a planned change. Yeah, we take the proactive approach to drive some workforce commitment and like the examples that I brought up, three levels. So how you make the changes, and usually most of the organization go for a chosen change because that's the most stable part, rather than you wait for the crisis to happen. So please make a note here. I made a mistake. So while I'm typing it, it's good that you brought it up, because I was just, I didn't read this part. I was just explaining it. So please make a note here. Crisis change is a reactive approach, which is generally, it is driven by the external factors or the fear of a failure. Chosen change is the planned change. It's a proactive approach driven by any planning for any success of the organization. Usually, this changes, it is usually takes place in terms of operational or the process level requirement, and improve your day-to-day incremental working improvements, as well as to improve the performance of your organization, employees, and so on. That's the area where we use that chosen change. Okay. Some of the strategies we take was the which the adoption is implemented in series steps, and reconstruction is the forced and reactive, where we realign the way the organization operates. Now it talks about this change type. It talks about 4 by the adoption, evolution, reconstruction, and revolution. When it comes to adoption, where it can be accommodated in terms of like incremental, and it can go through several stages and so on. Reconstruction is a this can involve the structural changes. How you have a structure or the process in place, but you are going ahead with the different structural changes. It can be a cost-cutting program, or it can be a fundamental change to the way that you operate or do your business, and it's about bringing in more efficiency. Whatever they do, that's what we try to put it under the reconstruction. Revolution changes, it's a forced change in short space of time, especially the crisis management, generally the mandatory changes. So those are, we call it revolution. The evolution is, it's implemented through the different stages and interrelated initiatives, especially the proactive changes. So, okay. Is that okay? Is it okay? Or
Sir, what is the difference between reconstruction and revolution changes? Both are forced changes.
no, revolution is it is is usually the change which occurs with the simultaneous initiatives. When you have multiple forces which is likely to happen, and where you try to react on the situations, especially the kind of a crisis management situation, generally the mandatory changes. Where the reconstruction part, when we talk about reconstruction, it's about it's a major structural changes. So that's a different. Now, revolution and reconstruction is sort of forced, but reconstruction is something that you are going for a structural changes. with the realignment of organization, how they operate, and it's changing the fundamental changes to the paradigm of the organization, the way you do business, and about making the organization more effective and better way, and how you realign the way the organization operate and so on. There can be multiple series of activities. It can go together as well. But whereas the revolution change is kind of a forced change. It's a compliance requirement, or it's a you fall short in certain thing and government regulatory changes, so you have to immediately get back with this. For example, now tax changes, the PF and all that, the government brought in a small amendment that they said that salaries, you don't need to deduct it from the salary, let the employees pay directly. So then in the payroll system, they had a pay cut for the pay tax. But whereas they have to make the change. Now, if the system is already designed and developed in such way, especially large organization, they can't adopt to make the changes, right? And also, it's going to impact their cash flow as well. Because previously, they had a plan where they can settle that in once in 3 months or 6 months or whatever, so that whatever percent, that 18 or 20% or whatever the salary which is being cut, it's not 18, it's maybe around, it depends on the salary scale as well. Also, there are different levels that it goes into. But now they ended up paying to the employees directly. So then it will have impact on their cash flow. So a lot of changes going to happen. They have to make the changes to the application. So that sort of thing, it's put it under the revolutionary change. I'm just brought up the simple example for that, which is normally it's a it happens in a shorter time frame. But reconstruction, you have time. You can plan it. You can execute in stages and all that. You can have a plan of 3 years, 5 years, something like that. But revolutionary changes are not like that. It's a shorter time period. But context is same, right? And also, revolutionary changes are, it's a forced changes. You have to do it. And it is most of the time, it is a reactive. That means you're not anticipating that. Suddenly you come across a situation. So therefore, you have to act on it. So that's the difference between reconstruction and the revolution. But both are forced. But it's just reactive, forced, reactive, but there is the force changing in the software stack. And it is a crisis. Then this is also, we can put it under reactive, because you are seeing the situation, accordingly you are trying to adjust into the environment. Is that okay?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
So, yeah, revolutionary versus evolutionary. Is that revolutionary versus evolutionary? No, reconstruction versus evolutionary. Is that what you asked for? Okay. So, revolutionary changes is generally the one person is orchestrate the change from the top, and the change is mostly about cutting costs to regaining control of the organization that has lost in the way of taking appropriate risk and all that. So that's the sort of a area where the revolutionary change is. It's tend to normally driven by the one individual, and he is surrounded by a small group of trusted people, because he is driving some initiative, but he or she has to drive it alone. But for that, they need support as well. and then this change is getting aligned with that individual around, surrounded by the individual itself. We need the senior management's buy-in as well. If the senior management are not in favor of driving that, then it's going to fail, because they have to have a trust on that. The people, then they think that the boss should tell everyone, and then they will do it. So because that's the level of the problem that they are going to face it, right? Whereas the evolutionary change, where the leader still the leader is orchestrate the change, but the leader tend to empower the people all through the organization to take on the change. Revolutionary change, the leader is driving it, but he has been surrounded by a small group of people, which we call trusted lieutenants from the top. By revolutionary change, leader orchestrate the change, and they tend to empower the people through the organization to take on the change. Where in here, the leader, they provide the resources, training, and authority for the people to engage in the change and become, more independent, and so on. So which method of change is right? What do you think? Is it revolutionary or evolutionary? What do you think? The revolutionary change is right or the evolutionary change is correct?
Evolutionary change is better, because the hierarchy, the top position is changed, then easily change the others.
Yeah, but revolutionary change, why it is being executed? Just look at the example that I told you. So are they, all the employees are going to willing to come down and say, okay, we will cut down our salary, we will cut down our cost? Are they going to, if you pass it to the managers and the operational team, okay, now you come up with the strategy where we should be able to cut down the cost by 40%. What would be the response?
Not only the forced by the motivation things also can be done by.
Answer to my question, because there are few reasons why revolutionary change is required. One of the reasons is cut down the cost. Now you want to cut down the cost by 40%. You're calling all your managers, leaders, and all that. Okay, guys, I believe you on your talents and your loyalty to the organization. I need to cut down the cost by 40%. I give you the authority. You go ahead and do whatever you want, but I need to see 40% cost reduction. They will get rid of all the people they think that they are going to be threat for them. They'll remove those and say, okay, remove these people, and your payroll will be reduced this much. Okay, that guy, those team, they are too much. So cut down the switch off the AC there, remove the AC there, and all that. Finally, you will have that 40%, but end of the day, you're going to screw. So those are the areas where the top guy who should take the decision and drive it and put it in such a way, everybody, you treat everybody equally, or whatever percentage you take it. So these are something that you can't let everybody to drive. But there are certain, it is not something one part is correct, but it's all about that it's an individual choice as well, right? It is not always true, right? And it can be true to yourself, but it's not on your nature of this fast-moving era, and it's a changing era, and not everybody is able to understand what's going to happen. Of course, we don't have appropriate data. If you ask anyone that when are we going to have the country fully open, whether can we have a Christmas party this year, how many people that we can accommodate, nobody will be able to answer. None of them. So that's why there are certain things, decisions has to be taken by the top, driven by the top. They come to the decision, okay, now, even though these are the situation, we are going to adopt 40% of employees can come to work, right? But the managers and others can say that this is difficult and they won't work and all that. No, then again, that sort of situation, yes, you can delegate to the managers and say, look, that you come up with the plan, that how are you going to keep the performance of this level, how we can manage the call reduction and all that, whatever the KPI that you wanted to assign to them, you can assign to them and you can tell them, come up with that. But when it comes to certain things are going wrong, and you see that, okay, this particular engagement, especially the dealing with one of the partner, or some of the customer segment, or some of the industry segment, the relationship is not going on the right way, and something went wrong already. Then you can't just, I could take a decision, okay, I'm going to let it go. So I'm going to make that person responsible and let him realize that, no, this is failed, then as a result, then he moved. You can take that sort of decision also, because when you realize that they're not going to continue, then you can put a blame on a man. But if you wanted to take it back, then you take the control and drive it from the top. And you keep at least 2-3 people from, but senior management should know, aware and all that. So, but then again, it depends on the situation. It depends on the people as well, right? So it's all about how you empower the people and delegate authority, as well as providing a strong leadership on what's need to be done. Then the evolutionary approach is not for you, right? So especially evolutionary, when it comes to evolutionary, it is there is high likely to be that change to be implemented, because as you said, that you are getting the support, receiving support from everyone and making them responsible, and it will become a part of their culture as well. It's more people have been involved in the design and implementing, and people identify with whatever the changes which need to be done, and then they're likely to change, and that fits the organization. And they also understand the current situation. And also, when it comes to the problem around, there are more people, more brains around the problem, and that leading to the thoughtful solutions as well. But there are disadvantages. There is a very risky upfront, and high likely the people will not understand or will not buy in the changes, and hard to build the momentum also. If they understood and drive it, it's fine. But if they fail to understand me, you are depending on them, they didn't understand, so things gets go wrong. This is why we have to be careful when we decide upon which approach that we are going to take it. And also, it's hard to find the people who are good at making evolutionary change. Because everywhere you will find at least 1 or 2% who is pulling the leg. It is a skill. The people, they rarely credit for their work that you might you would be doing it, or you might not know what they are doing and all that. That there are a lot of operational challenges and issues which is coming across. Whereas revolutionary change, it is usually changed by the mandate, and where you see the type of change, especially you are changing the leadership, or you are into the crisis situation. Especially when you are changing the leadership, then you got somebody need to take the lead and support from the a couple of other senior members to drive that. Or you are handling the crisis situation. So then again, you don't want everyone to feel that we are into the crisis. So 4 or 5 senior management team or senior people get together and take the ownership and drive it and make sure you try to take that change, which is whatever the change which happens, which whatever the outcome that we are expecting, which is failing to take effect, then you try to put some effort and try to bring it up. That usually happens in most of the organization. Then the change will occur quickly. And mostly the changes, what we are planning, that they need more resources, and there has to be a lot of planning. Those are the characteristics that we can talk about revolutionary changes. But when it comes to disadvantage of the revolutionary changes, especially the rollback of those changes are it's little time consuming. Especially when you are looking at the leadership change, and you can't just fix that overnight. It will take at least months, couple of months, or maybe even sometimes 6 months to fill that gap and put the operation back on track. And especially some political changes, right? And like capital loss and so on. The way how it is moving in terms of our dollar versus rupee depreciation and the crisis that we are going through, we cannot just put it back. So that's why we take that into the various areas where how we can look at things and so on. Why the organization-wide change is difficult to compress? Now, this is important part. How we think, how we feel, and how we can influential in our life is all about how we process in our brain and how we process that information that has to do with why these changes are so hard and so on. So have you ever noticed that you have an idea of you want to change, but you have a clear sense of the new behavior that you want to do it, yet you will find yourself so often falling back to the old habitual behavior. This is mostly everyone is experiencing it, because what we see as a outcome when we try to do it, it's not the same way that we think or we wanted to do it. It's generally what our brain process in a crisis situation is generally either we fight or we flight, we go away. I think that's the challenge that we have to understand. And there are so many other habits also. Sometimes we do it unconsciously. Therefore, to create a habit, that we got to be very conscious and very, very purposeful. The reason is every time we do, we think that we feel something, then we create something, and that is called the neural pathway, right? Now, this is where we have to understand why things are getting wrong. When you look at something and when we wanted to do something, and and then we think, and then we feel something, okay, this is how it has to be done. And then we create something. That's called the neural pathway. It's just like a normal pathway that we are talking about. The more we go down the pathway, the more that we repeat that particular thought or action or the behavior, that pathway becomes more easier to go down. And that's why some of our old goals are so powerful. I mean, we are very much fluent, we are very much okay to do the routine works, right? We generally, if you do L1 support, and the moment we pick up, good morning, blah, 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 how can I help you, and all that, where are you calling from? And there are a set of questions, even while you're sleeping, that you can ask that question because you are used to it. And it's a kind of a bad news for us, because but there is a good news also, that we have a neural pathway. That is something that we created how things to be done. So when we do it again and again, it can be something that you created a process that you follow that, and then nobody go away from that because everybody is used to do that. So likewise, when we are used to that, then we don't lose that part. So therefore, the way you want to make the change in your life is really about not about stopping the problems, but to start practicing the solution. Most of the time where we fail is we try to tackle with the problems. When somebody create problem, we try to fight with that, react on it. That is also a strategy by the opponent. They try to take your attention out of your goal. So then they try to create some issues, challenges, and try to put it. So what you have to look at is not to stop the problems, but how you practice the solution. Now the challenge is, initially, that's going to be very uncomfortable for us, because it's not going to be a natural thing that you usually do it. Because most of us, this is common, we are very good in an environment where no problem, but you are dealing with daily life. Even it can be with husband and wife, and friends and lovers also. When there is no problem, they are pretty much happy. They see, how they are behaving, and they are so kind, and they eating each other and all that. Suddenly something happened, then they cannot cope up with it. You see, they broke away or divorced, or so many issues that this is common with the human life. We tend to tackle with the problems rather than finding the solutions. And I'm going to, how we should be look at is how we are going to think about it, and how we are going to be very purposeful in handling such situations. If we try to do it over and over again, then we will be creating a neural pathway to how to handle the situation. That's what we call, some people say that when couples are fighting, the problem will not get solved, but they're used to it, right? So that's why we say that you're going into that again and again and again. Pretty soon it will become our habit. So that's why we have to look at that, why the organizational change is difficult to accomplish. Okay, so I hope that you got the basic understanding about this change management, and how how you can do, what are the steps and why it is difficult to achieve it, and how you can achieve it also. Let's quickly look at some more perspective. Actually, we have to cover a little bit more. I'll try to go a little faster. When it comes to organizational development, which usually engage the people to achieve the better organizational performance, and it is mainly the organizational development is the center of all the employee engagement. So there are two primary themes for the organizational development. One is the employee engagement, and second one is the organization performance. So the first step is why we should be doing this, especially the organization development, and then we should understand and apply the concept of the principles of how we can do this engagement and so on within the organization today. So the organization development is a sort of a planned effort by the leadership, and it is supported by the employee to increase the employee engagement. And it is usually you have to plan it and effectively drive it through the processes and systems to make sure there is no failure which is coming. Objective is to increase the organization's strategy that include the vision, mission, values, and all sort of engagement, trust, effectiveness, and name anything that which is coming under the organization development. Everything has to be like this. And it's also an effort that to plan the organization wide and how you can manage the top and increase the organizational effectiveness through these planned activities. How you can bring in that employee engagement, how you can bring in the trust within the people, and how you can bring in that the organizational culture and the performances. All that put together, we call it the organizational development. Generally, the organizational development that seek to the employee who have desire to grow and develop. And they also have a strong need to be accepted by others. And especially the way the organization development is designed, that will influence the way the individual and the group of people they behave in the organization. So this is about improve the organization effectiveness, align employee behavior within the organization, and maximize the employee contribution towards success, and promote organization culture and creative positive changes. The organizational design is attempt to influence the member of the organization to enhance their experience and take a greater responsibility for their own actions as organization members. The characteristics, organizational design characteristics, organizational development characteristics. The first is the potential. That is a positive belief about the potential employee. The next is the system. All part of your organization must work together. Then the learning. The employee, they should be participate in the experiences which related to their works and so on. Next, the problem solving. Where the problem solving identified corrective actions, and it is taken the progress where you assess it and adjust it, and they made whatever things it is required to be done in this way. The next is the adaptability. Adaptability is the perspective and the behavior which are adopted to fit the organizational needs. And finally, the change. The organization which simulate and facilitate and how they coordinate the changes. There are some three concepts in the organizations as well. This concept, the organizational, the three concepts of the organizational changes that include the organization climate, which is the mood or the unique personality of the organization, which is defined by the employee engagement. Then the organizational culture, it is deeply, seated norms, value, and the behavior of the member, and they share. And thirdly, the organizational strategy of an organization, which identified problems and planned actions, and how they negotiate the changes and how they evaluate the progress and so on. Generally, the operational development practices, which develop the strategy for increasing the organizational performance. And organizational development is continuously, it is a continued strategy to improve the strategy, as well as which is required for planning to identify where you want to reach. To understand this, the reality where you want to go, you have to identify the vision of the future and how to get there. So you must bringing in the plan to reality through a measurable actions and outcomes. So in order to do that, we got to have the concept of when we think about organizational change, that concept has to be considered and taken into the face. Our organization development is involved an ongoing systematic process of implementing effective organizational change. Today, the organizations operate in a rapidly changing environment. Especially the organization development involved on an ongoing systematic process of implementing the effective organization changes, and consequently, the most of the important aspect of the organization is the ability to manage the change. So that's the most critical part when we were looking at the whole day. It's the intervention. So in terms of the intervention, we often use this organizational development, where the intervention is structured engagement that used individually or collectively to improve the organizational performance. Every action that you influence the organizational performance can be called the intervention, right? There is another question set. I'm just thinking, I'll put it up after I cover these slides. So I hope it's okay with you. But there is another set of questions you need to do. There are another 3 questions. Is it okay if I do this afterwards? Are you with me? There is another set of quiz. Okay, I'll finish this quickly and then we'll move on to the quiz afterwards, right? So the change management process that ensure especially the project while you are executing the project is going to be it's an unanticipated event, I would say. Of course, you know that any project there is a change is required, and The project mean that you are initiating something, that means you are adding something, or you are changing something, or you are creating something. So it is a change for the organization. But there are situations you come across unanticipated events that can occur. And those unanticipated events are those are causing the changes to the project plan itself. Right? For example, that you, while you are implementing, you find out, okay, this particular current database is not supported while you are implementing it, even though its specification says it is backward compatible and all that, while try to connect it, it's not connecting. So it's not compatible. Now you end up upgrading your database. So with that, you have to go for a structural change where server need to be upgraded, operating system need to be upgraded, and with that, the connected system need to be upgraded. So many things it's coming up. So that can impact the project timeline as well, project plan itself. So we are going to basically deviate from what was planned initially to do, and because of this, the change in the circumstance. Now, the significant change in the project that need to be documented and that need to be communicated to the entire project team to maintain alignment of all effort that works being done by that group of teams. These objectives are achieved by using the change management process. If you don't follow the proper change management process, you may not be able to achieve that. It also goes ahead and ensure that team members are in alignment. And to do that, we need to communicate what is the plan and what we change and where are we going to. So the change management process to maintain during the project execution, and that ensure that we have a discipline to maintain the wastages. Especially the project-wise organization, their daily operation is like this. You got to maintain the proper change management process, otherwise the whole system is going to be affected. We don't have members of team who is working things that are no longer valid. You might put something, your team might be working on some of the activities, but that requirement would have been started by the end customer, maybe yesterday or a couple of weeks back. You haven't communicated. That change management plan has been not taken place, mean you're going to stay. So we can minimize the use of these resources that's needed to be achieved. Otherwise, this is why the change management is administered by the project manager itself. That is one of the key responsibilities of the project manager. The fact is that more administration, the project manager is responsible to manage the change. They're making sure the team is held together. As the first step, change management process. Any change management process, really, it comprises of 4 steps. There are the 4 stages or 4 steps of the change management process that can be performed in many different ways. We really look at each team to develop the change management process. The first step is the change request. The change request is to basically to this is essential to document the change that need to be something different than what you have already asked for. Through this change request, we can identify the change, what that we needed to change, and why we needed that change. So that's what the change request document talking about. This could be initiated by any member of the team as well, or customer, or the development team itself. So any members of this team that feel that we need to change something, either in terms of design or our manufacturing process method, or the plan that can be changed, or whatever changes that need to be done, they have to make a change request. That could be anything like a recovery plan or modification or design, or can be even having just do performance and finding a new ways to do this and all that. So those are the information which goes into the change request form or change request. Then the analysis part. The second step is the change analysis. Here, all affected members of this team, they analyze the implication of the change. Now it is the people who affected by the change, they meet because the most knowledgeable in terms of what's going wrong or what happened. If that if we initiate that change, is those team who is affected, they know better. Then this team who analyze, they meet through the through this to discuss about this, and then they go through that, and they look at how they can interact and so on, and then what are the impact that's going to have it, and they look at is there any alternatives that they can bring it to achieve that, or without doing that change, whether they can continue without making that change. And then finally they take a decision, okay, yeah, we'll go ahead with the change request. And then they negotiate the commitment. And then what will happen is they they prepare the work package, that what to be included, and who are the people going to work on it, and who is responsible, and what to be done, and all sort of things, and also the budget which is to be added, and everything will be discussed. And then those changes that going through the change that we need to negotiate, and how we are going to accommodate those differences, and what are we going to do, and so on. Everything need to be discussed. So we might even look at a situation where we can it can be a whether we can manage it within the same set of people, or we need to bring in different people, and whether we can do it within the time duration, or we need to add some extra times and all that, whether you're going to push the project timeline by a certain time period. Various things need to be analyzed before we. So that is what it has been done during the analysis phase. And then what sort of reduction or extended task which is going to be happen, and how we can extend the overrun, and or we might begin with the partial information. This is the case where that the work package that we are talking about in that change process, we need to identify what information is required for processing this task or the change, and then under the guidelines, and we can move on. So here we analyze the change to determine why we need to do that change, and how can we possibly implement it, and how we can do this development plan. So next is the change approval. Change approval is when we have a accepted plan, the change implementation plan. Then the project manager they feel they feels the workable, and we have a change approval, and who approves a change. Now that the analyzing team, they did the analysis and they said, okay, fine, we are good to go. We have analyzed everything. We are saying that this is our recommendation. So then the project manager is responsible for administering the change through the change process, right? So he decide whether by bringing in that change, whether it is going to have an impact on any of the operation or in a system. And now we have he come up with a plan. Okay, now I'm going to approve it. We are going to go ahead with this change. So we have a new plan which incorporates those agreed on whatever the change analysis has been proposed. So then the project manager also establish a date, the communication plan with the effective date. When will this change take place, and whether is it going to be immediately or will it be done in 1 week, 2 week, whatever time frame that they wanted to get it done. So then that's how the change approval part will take. Then the fourth one, which is the implementation part. When it comes to implementation part, this space where the project manager, they're doing additional role here, where they manage the change introduction, and this change become a mini project sometime. The project manager ensure everyone is communicated when the documentation is complete. And they have the accurate record, despite the fact that we are going to change and so on. The project manager, we communicate the entire project team that we have a new plan of records and we change whatever the documentation plan and all that. And then he bring up the justifications, extremely important, and it's this will help us execute things faster and also fix some of the issues that you are facing. That we should bring in sort of justification to make the people to accept that, and we find it that more comfortable, and should be able to manage whatever the work is being progressed as well without impacting the timeline and so on. So that's how it's been handled. Now it's time for the question. Any questions so far? If not, I will put the quiz. All of you have submitted the question, the answers?
Yes, sir.
I'm going to check that. Before that, I'm going to put this question live. Right, so I'm going to put this question. Let me check.
Excuse me, sir.
Yeah.
Hello.
Yes, go ahead.
Sir, the last quiz, I think you said that you are giving enough time for that. Should we supposed to submit it now also? What are we getting?
What do you suggest? You want more time?
It better so if we can.
Yes, sir.
Because we were listening to the.
Okay, I'll extend it. Not an issue, but you have to finish it. Just hold on, I'm trying to, okay, because there are several questions that I prepared and now it's about revolutionary change. Yeah, that's the question. Hold on. This is give me a minute. I have this small correction that I have to make. But anyway, I can pass the question to you all, but I need to make a small modification that you might confuse. Okay. Right, got it. So this is not a difficult subject because I wanted to make it so easy and convenient for you all. But I wanted you all to do it as a fun as well. Okay, fine. Now it should be correctly visible. It's actually they're very just three questions only here, so you can quickly submit it. Submit the answers, yeah. All right, just three questions, simple questions.